Hello and welcome. I'm here today with Claire Baker, and I'll tell you a bit about Claire. She is a sought-after coach, speaker, and author of 50 Things You Need to Know About Periods. For over a decade, Claire has taught thousands how to live in harmony with their menstrual cycle rather than working against it. She believes menstrual cycle awareness is the missing key in women's well-being, empowerment, and creativity, and her immersive online courses and workshops inspire women to know their flow and become the authority in their own lives. Thank you so much for being here, Claire. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to sharing with your community.
Yeah, I reached out to you originally because I discovered through your website that you're really passionate about journaling as a tool
Mhm.
for deepening self-awareness and connecting with one's cyclical nature. So before we talk about journaling itself, could you summarize in a few words your general philosophy around cyclical living?
Mm. Yeah, cyclical living and especially the menstrual cycle is at the heart of what I do. So I'm a coach and a writer first and foremost, and I work with women and I center the menstrual cycle in the work that we do. So it's less about treating painful periods and it's more about learning how to work with our creative ebbs and flows across the menstrual cycle, why we might feel different from week to week, relationships, self talk, that kind of thing, which is why journaling is such a great tool that I use with clients and also in my own life. But honestly, the primary thing I do now in my work is training other practitioners to integrate menstrual cycle awareness into their businesses, into their practices. Yeah.
Brilliant. That I love what you say about encouraging women to become the authority in their own lives. That really
Mm-hmm.
resonates with my stance on, yeah, how journaling can help us access our own inner knowing and deeper understanding of ourselves, and then help us to activate that in our lives in different ways.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And in terms of your own personal practice, how would you say that has played a role in your journey and how has it evolved over time?
My journaling practice.
Yeah.
So I was actually just at home at my parents over Christmas, and I was asked to go through a bunch of old boxes because my parents are doing a big clean out. And I found journals dating back from when I was like 4 or 5 years old, all the way through my like kid years, teen years. I have every journal I've ever written, like through my 20s, all the way through my 30s. And I'm talking like big plastic boxes. I don't know what to do with them. Maybe your community have some ideas. But it's interesting looking back because of course it has, my style has changed, but a lot has stayed the same, honestly. Like a lot of what I do, and we'll speak more about this, I'm sure, when I'm journaling, is quite conversational. I'm often speaking to myself or to God or to a future version of myself or to an archetype, or there's like often a conversation happening, and that's still very true for me now. And looking back at my old kid journals, it was exactly what I was doing then too. I would say in the last 10 years, my focus has definitely become more focused on my menstrual cycle. So at the top of the page, for example, I'll write the date and then I'll write what day of my cycle I'm on. And I've done this now for at least, 10, 11 years. And again, I'm sure we'll speak more about this, but that really helps with pattern finding and figuring out like what's happening with my cycle and through the lens of journaling. So that has definitely changed. But it's just been such a like sanity saving practice for me for my whole life. I've always said, like, I think my mental health really benefits from having a journaling practice. My business benefits, my creativity benefits. Yeah, everything is like solved pretty much on the page.
Wow, it's
Uh,
so wonderful to hear you talk about it in that way and how it's been this core piece of your life basically since your childhood. Yeah, I can recognize that because I also have all my journals dating back to age 9. And I love to look back through them and revisit periods of my life and yeah, also see the similarities of how I am now and the little shifts that I've made, but this kind of spiraling nature of our lives, as we go through different phases and deepen our, journeys. Um, what would you suggest as a kind of starting point for someone who's not really connected to their body? Maybe they're not, they're new to this idea of cyclical living or the menstrual cycle awareness. What might be a practice or a prompt that they could use to start that journey?
Yeah, there's a few things I would say. The first is it's great to know whereabouts you are in your menstrual cycle. And the easiest way to figure that out is to look back to your last period and the first day of full blood flow, not just spotting, but full blood flow. That's your day one. And then you're just simply going to count forward from there until today. And then that's your cycle day. And like I said, what I do is I just include that next to the date. So at the top of your journal entry, whatever you do to sort of orient yourself, whether you include the date, the day, the lunar phase, whatever, I would just include the menstrual cycle day as well. So that's just one thing to get started. Then, if you wanted to take it a little bit further and connect a bit more each day, you could use what I call the four bodies, which is the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies, and just literally like one or two words for each. So, for example, for physical, it might be tired, hungry. For mental, it could be like calm or anxious. And then for emotional, it might be grateful or chaotic, or upset, something like this related to your feelings. And then spiritual is very subjective, but that could be like connected or peaceful, something like this. So we're working with those four different bodies. Like, how is your physical body? How is your head? How is your heart? And then, how is your soul or your spirit? And just one or two words. And I like to start my journal entries like that, just to kind of get moving and get going. And that's also a really easy way to start to look for patterns if you want to start getting into pattern finding as well, just having those four bodies down on the page.
That's so interesting because, when I started to work with menstrual cycle awareness, that's basically what I started doing I mean, that was just what I naturally chose to do. Um, I actually chose to kind of keep a separate kind of grid at the back of my journal that just showed the day and those four separate brief
Mm.
entries so that I
Mm-hmm.
could easily like get an overview of each cycle rather than, in amidst the longer writings because I felt like, oh, they'll just get, lost in there. But so yeah, it's so funny how naturally kind of did write something very similar. And just to clarify, obviously, not everyone has a menstrual cycle, but we still have a cyclical nature. Would you like to say something about how you work with people who are not
Mm-hmm.
menstruating?
Of course, yeah. I mean, there's oftentimes in the female life journey where we won't be menstruating. We may be on birth control. We could be pregnant, postpartum. We could be postmenopause, having amenorrhea. So there's plenty of times where that may happen. And then, of course, there's like the rest of our lives after menopause when we're not bleeding. But of course, we're still cyclic beings. I find there's a few different ways to think about this. Checking in with like the daily cycle, the 24-hour circadian cycle is really the one that I think we're most familiar with, actually. We might not pay as much attention to it, but actually, like, we know how it feels to be at 6 a.m. compared to 6 p.m. There is like a natural cycle we move through every day. So even just noticing whereabouts in the day you might feel more called to journal, or the kind of journaling that you feel inspired by or nourished by at different times, that can be an interesting practice. Then we can think about the lunar cycle. Some women I know find it beneficial to adopt the lunar cycle if they're currently not menstruating. Not everybody, but some people find it helpful to have that handrail. So we can look at the new moon when the moon is dark in the sky as being like menstruation. So actually, the moon also has days. So that very first day of the new moon would be like day one. And then the full moon is going to be around day 14. And then it's going to come back down again. So it mirrors the menstrual cycle quite nicely. I tend to keep track of the moon in my journal as well, next to my cycle date. And then thinking seasonally as well. So thinking about what season are you currently in? There might be seasons that you notice that you just don't even think to pick up your journal. Maybe you're just really busy out in the world doing stuff. And then other seasons where you're writing a lot. Like for me, I definitely know when it's autumn or winter, I'm way more likely to be like cozied up with my journal in the evening than I am when it's summer and I'm out more being more social. And the same is reflected in my menstrual cycle too. So it can also be really fun to start to notice those patterns as well, like how those patterns play out across your daily, monthly, menstrual, lunar, yearly cycles, because there are often patterns. So there's plenty that we can think about beyond just the menstrual cycle.
That's great, yeah, because I feel like the bigger seasons of the year have such a huge impact on us,
Yeah.
and more and less depending on where we live in the world. Like I've been living in a rural environment for the last 10, 12 years, and I feel so much more impacted by the seasons since moving away from a city life. Um, yeah, it's just so integral to the whole like flow of day to day, month to month. Um, yeah, my reality in those cycles. So yeah, it's good to acknowledge how there's these like macro and micro cycles that operate
Yeah.
within us and around us. Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
And how would you then say, like, from that starting point of beginning to track the cycle and watching those different changes, how does that, how does journaling then support someone to deepen that connection to one's cyclical nature?
Yeah. So journaling, as I'm sure your community are aware, can just help to slow things down a bit and slow down what's happening in our minds or in our bodies and just start to like make sense of what's going on. That if we're just living our lives and we don't have that awareness, then it can be easy to miss things. And what I love about journaling and about menstrual cycle awareness, I guess, is that awareness piece, is that it just helps us to have some awareness of how we're feeling and what's going on in our lives. So I find that journaling in itself and cycle charting as a practice is like mindfulness. It's a mindfulness practice. So it's just helping us to slow things down a little, check in with ourselves each day, just to have that moment. That in and of itself, I think, can really transform our relationship with our cycle and then how we choose to show up in our lives. And it's that moment that like, what day am I on today? Oh yeah, how am I feeling? What's going on? All right, what do I know about this, cycle day 17, for example? What have I tracked before? What have I learned about myself through slowing down and having this awareness? Okay, how might then shape how I'm going to approach today? And like I said, my journaling style is quite conversational. So I'll literally be writing this out in my journal. Like, okay, cool. So what does that mean then for today? How can I take care of myself today? What do I need to be aware of? And I I this is my preference. This is the way I approach menstrual cycle awareness rather than very like strict rigid rules about what you should and shouldn't do in each phase. It's actually this daily check-in, this slowing down and mindfulness that I feel like really, yeah, like gives women that self-authority piece that helps to build that confidence so that we can make better choices for ourselves according to the data and the intel that we're collecting through journaling rather than what a book tells us about menstrual cycles and our bodies or what someone on TikTok has told us, or a friend who's experienced that the authority then comes from us and it takes some time, but this is where that journaling can really support those patterns to emerge.
Yeah, because it's really about building trust in one's own experience, right? And becoming familiar with, yeah, what each day or what each phase looks like for us. And I know that when I started out on the journey of menstrual cycle awareness, I could get quite fixed on how I should be in the different phases or like, yeah, what I should be doing or shouldn't be doing. And I think because we're so used to outsourcing like wisdom to other people and authorities and experts, it can be quite a challenging shift to tune into like our own lived experience and really trust and just allow the unique blueprint of what that is for each of us to emerge. And that's going to shift and change month to month, year to year, as we enter into different phases of our life also. Um, so yeah, it's so empowering to then have a tool like journaling or, any type of mindfulness practice where you're just really listening and opening to what is going on inside and yeah,
Mm.
learning to trust and follow that. Um,
Yeah.
and you've talked about having a conversation in your journaling practice, like a conversation with the page. I'm just curious to know because I have often used something called the journal dialogue, where you're literally like have often two or sometimes more, but usually two voices speaking on the page to each other. I was curious whether you'd ever used something like that, where you actually have a different voice reply to your questions or ponderings.
Intuitively, I've never followed um, a framework or guidance around that. I think it's something that has emerged when I know that there's a specific voice an energy that I want to connect with. Um, but to be honest, not frequently. It's not something I do often, but it has emerged at times. Yeah. Is there a specific framework
It's a very
around
intuitive
this?
process. I mean, it's
Right.
literally like you allow one voice to speak and then another one replies, but it's like
Yeah.
written like a play script, So I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking and then maybe my inner critic is speaking and we have like a dialogue with each other on the page. Um,
Mm,
it's a really kind of profound and oddly insightful thing. Like you think you're just making it up, and then these
mm,
gems of wisdom
mm,
surface, and it's fascinating. But I'm sure
mhm.
that, with just journaling in general, it happens without that kind of
Yeah.
structure. It's just, yeah, it gives it a
Yeah.
different, like you said, like a framework to simply put it
Yeah, I
on the
like that.
page.
It's like the like parts work, just
Yeah,
that,
yeah, exactly.
aligning with that concept. Yeah, yeah. I definitely do something like this around the archetypes. So I quite like working with the different archetypes in the menstrual cycle. So if I'm in my follicular phase, for example, which aligns more with the like playful maiden archetype, then I quite like conversing with her when I'm in that phase, or the crone when I'm bleeding, connecting with that like wise inner self. I think my 80-year-old self gets quite a lot of airtime, actually. I feel like I'm often checking in with that older, wiser part of me that has a bit more of a perspective on things than I do.
Yeah, I love archetypes as well. It's again, yeah, it's that capacity to tune into something beyond our normal state of consciousness and writing, if we like really free it up and just allow the pen to kind of flow freely, that can really take us into those intuitive places in a way that talking often can't, right? Because
Mm,
we hold back or we can't voice, out loud things that
mm,
we might know at a deeper level. Yeah, writing is really powerful for that. Um, and how does journaling help us to not just track our energy, but actually work with it and like replenish our well-being and
mm.
prevent burnout, would you say?
Yeah. Yeah, this is when that next part comes in. So after the check-in, and it needs to be an honest check-in. I think what can sometimes happen with menstrual cycle charting is that we can start to get to know how a certain day or phase feels for us typically. And then we can just assume that every day will feel like that. So it really does require like an honest check-in. Just because you're ovulating, for example, and you typically have lots of energy doesn't mean that every time you're ovulating, you're going to have huge capacity. So it's an honest check-in. And then from that place, I quite like to map out my day. It's very practical. Like a lot of my journal is honestly just logistics. It's just like, okay, cool. So this is what I'm feeling. This is how I need to take care of myself today. And then I'll often really just map out, okay, so what does the day look like then? Or I might do it in the evening and assess like how the day went and where perhaps I gave more than I had to give, or what worked really well. Like I quite like reflecting on the day as you know as it's happened, or I like reflecting at the very end of a menstrual cycle. So the premenstrual phase, especially in the days leading up to bleeding, is a really good vantage point. Like you can really see the last, cycle, and to go through each phase. And okay, so how did that phase go? Like what was my period like the last time, and how was I able to care for myself, and where did I potentially give more than I had to give? Okay, cool. How was my follicular phase? How was ovulation? Where, what can I celebrate about this cycle? What did I create? Who did I connect with? When did I advocate for myself, for example? And then to be honest about when perhaps things went a bit sideways, what you would do differently next time, where your blind spots and vulnerabilities were, and how you might care for things differently. So I really love that like autumn energy of discernment and reflecting and truth telling, either at the end of the day in preparation for the next day, or at the end of the menstrual cycle in preparation for the next one. And then you can, bleed and not bleed it on it, and then start again with that information. So I think those, being honest with yourself, being quite practical, like letting yourself be quite practical in your journal, and then using that autumn energy to, yeah, be again honest and reflective about what's working well for you and what to lean more into, and then perhaps what you actually need less of in the next cycle.
Yeah, that sounds like such a great way to capture the insights of the whole, yeah, the cycle as a whole, whether that's, yeah, the cycle of the day, but also the menstrual cycle as a whole. Um, yeah, for some time now, I've really loved the energy of the premenstrual phase. Like it's
Mm.
become the time in the phase where I just feel most in my power, like most tuned into my essence, really, and my passions, and
Mm.
have most courage to share them and speak about them and write about them. So yeah, I love the idea of using that energy and also, yeah, that level of discernment and kind of truth telling to
Mm.
really assess, like, yeah, what's worked well here? What could I do differently? How am I taking care of myself? Or how could I do that better next cycle?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the best time for an audit. I think if we try to audit when we're ovulating and there's just heaps of estrogen in the system, then we're likely to perhaps like have rose-colored glasses on how things are actually going. And it's
Yes.
great. Like, it's great to have that energy. It can be very useful for many things, but it's not so great at being really honest about like where like what our capacity currently is, and what do we have to give, and actually how we like to receive. There's a journaling practice I like to recommend in the autumn phase, in that premenstrual week, called the autumn list, which is just a list of everything that's annoying you and frustrating you, because that time can be, like, for a lot of women, really tough. Like that's when premenstrual symptoms can flare up, and especially if someone has like premenstrual dysphoric disorder, for example, it can be extremely difficult. And even if there's just a general annoyance. So I like to recommend an autumn list, which doesn't require you to take action on anything, but it's just a list of everything that is annoying you or frustrating you or that you want to do something about. And there's just no pressure or expectation on you to do anything about it, but to just like be again honest and with yourself, and to use those powers of discernment to then decide perhaps in the next cycle what you would actually like to maybe make some changes around, but to like let it out. Let
Yeah.
it out.
Yeah, I love that. Lists are such a good way for just like getting everything down
Yeah.
that's in your head in no particular order. And yeah, I can really see that autumn list being a great way of just venting whatever's,
Yeah,
surface. Because
exactly.
you're so right, like in the ovulatory phase, yeah, I can often be like life's just great. I've got nothing to
Mm.
worry about, no worries, and everything is going well. And then suddenly there's this shift as I transition into the premenstrual phase of just like, hang on, I'm not happy about this. I don't want it to be like this. And
Yeah.
yeah, so it's so funny how we see through a different lens in each phase and yeah,
Totally. Yeah,
different
it's
things come to
astonishing.
light. Yeah. And to and the more I talk with my partner about this and like get really honest with him. I mean, often that honesty surfaces in the premenstrual phase because that's when I'm just like, you know what, I'm just going into this phase of my cycle now and things are going to start to annoy me more and these things are starting to come up. So, but I think that's such a helpful way to navigate our relationship as well, you know, not just my own interactions with the world, but how we work together as a
Mm.
partnership. And yeah, to really
Yeah.
be honest about that so it can not be the stumbling point, you know, because
Mm.
it can be otherwise, right? If and it
Of
still can be
course.
whether you're aware of it or
Yeah.
not. But um so talking about these different voices and like different qualities of the different phases, um I've noticed how I mentioned the inner critic earlier, like how the inner critic can, or our intuition can sound different in different phases of the cycle.
Mm.
And I'm wondering if you have a way of using journaling to like work with these inner voices and meet them with more
Mm.
compassion or clarity.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that journaling is a great way to meet these voices. I like that way you've put it. So, one of my teachers, Alexandra Pope, talks about the premenstrual phase being the natural home of the inner critic. So, the critical voice that we all have is completely normal and a healthy thing to have. Does have a place, right? It can often actually really point out when things aren't working so well for us, and that there's stuff that we might want to consider or reassess in our lives. But it has a tendency to turn the volume way up and to just dominate other voices and to become quite personal. So the critic has a tendency to, instead of I can use a recent example. I was really struggling to get my taxes in on time again, this end of this January. It's like 31st of January every year. I always leave it to the last minute. And I think to myself, Claire, just get it done earlier. Why do you leave this till the last minute? So it's this like stress time with my accountant. Um, so the critic, rather than just saying like, hey, maybe next year you could schedule in November, like let's get taxes started, it's you're unreliable, you're disorganized, you're a terrible business owner. I can't believe you've done this again. Why haven't you learned? Like it's just so cruel and it becomes personal. So it's not just about a behavior that I could definitely work on changing. It's like me as a human being. I'm wrong. I'm not worthy. I'm a failure. Right. You get what I'm trying to say. And I find that journaling is a really great way, with that awareness in mind, to catch the inner critic out when it starts to get really personal. Because again, we slow things right down. And so when I'm journaling and I'm noticing these thoughts and feeling like this and I'm frustrated and I let the frustrations out, I can just begin to slow it down and start to see, okay, like where is this voice getting personal? What's actually true here? Is it true that I'm a terrible business owner? No, it's not. That's not true. Is it true that I'm not worthy? That's not also not true. But like what is true here? There's probably something in here that I could listen to, right? Okay, what might that be? What could I do to support myself to actually make this change? And so it's just really slowly breaking it down that way. And something that, again, Alexandra Pope talks about is sending the critic home in your menstrual cycle to that autumn phase. So if you notice those voices becoming really loud when you're bleeding or when you're in the pre-ovulatory phase or the ovulatory phase, her recommendation is actually to send that voice to the premenstruum to say, listen, I'm bleeding right now. I'm really sensitive. Like I'm in a vulnerable place and this is like my like loving home. I want to care for my body, my mind, and my heart right now. Like, we're not getting into it. We're not going to get into it. Like, we will, but let's make a date for a few weeks' time. Same for the pre-ovulatory phase, same for ovulation. Like, those phases are not about reflecting and discerning. It's the natural home of that reflective week. So I like that advice. I think it's not always so easy to follow, but I do try to do that, to say, okay, I'm in my autumn. What do we need to look at? And kind of get into it. But I am really protective of that menstrual week. When I notice that inner critic voice coming up, I really try to just like buffer up those other voices, the cheerleader, the crone, like that beautiful wise archetype of menstruation, like that crone that's just like, this is, who cares about your tax? Whatever, it's fine. Like, it's not in the scheme of your life. Like, you're good. Like, that's tuning into those other voices. I think it's helpful to have that permission slip that, like, that's not where the critic belongs. There are other voices that we can amplify. And I think journaling is such an amazing way to be able to give, like, pass the mic, I suppose, to those other voices to become louder.
Yeah. Um, the the teaching that Alexandra and Chani from Red School gave around the inner critic was really life-changing for me. Um, when I started to work with the inner critic in that way, like creating these really clear boundaries around when it was welcome and when it wasn't welcome. And then I was actually using that dialoguing technique then to work with it actively in the premenstrual phase. It just changed my life. Like I was going through these inner critic attacks, and I, at the time, I wasn't really aware of where it was happening in my cycle, but my suspicion is that it was always often happening in my pre-ovulatory phase, where I was really vulnerable, because I feel like that's a really vulnerable part of the cycle for me. And I would just crumble, like I would become paralyzed. I just like it totally was preventing me from living my life and really like it's just shattering my self-worth. And when I started to work with the inner critic in the way that you're describing, well, very quickly, I just became much better at recognizing that voice when it became active. Like even just the first few words, it's like, ah, that's the inner critic. And okay, wait, I'll speak to you when I'm ready. And then when I started to dialogue with it on the page, then we could start to get to this constructive place of digging beneath the insults and the general blanket statements about how rubbish I was, to, yeah, like, okay, so what you're really saying is da 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 da, and okay, I could do this maybe, or yeah, that's okay, but I'm happy where I am, or whatever. So yeah, I just want to like recognize, acknowledge what a powerful practice that has been for me. And I know, having worked with others with the inner critic, how transformational it can be. Um,
Mm. Mm.
do you find there are other voices? I mean, you've talked about tapping into that wise older version of yourself. Um, and yeah, the other archetypes that you recognize. Are there other voices that you find you can tune into with journaling, um,
Mm.
or
Yeah, I
allow
would
to speak more
say
clearly?
my my younger self as well, I would say, tapping into her. I don't tend to go there as much actually, but I can, and I do find that helpful. Especially when I think that part of me needs some care. I think that's when I find it most helpful to connect with her, is when I can tell that there's something that's coming up for me that's very old and it's connected to an experience that she had. Definitely like a divine presence is quite easy for me to access, and it's a presence that I would call God. Other people might have different names for it. Um, that's really easy for me, and I find that that's something that I connect with every day, and it's mostly through gratitude. just so, giving thanks for everything that I have. Like that just naturally pours out of me most days at some point, usually towards the end. I love how Julia Cameron talks about this with morning pages. Like the start can be often quite like grumpy and rah, 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 whatever's happening as you start the day. But by the end of your journaling practice, often things are more peaceful and grateful and, harmonious. And I would say that's definitely true for me as well. So by the end, I'm definitely connecting much more in with that presence and giving thanks and asking for, you know, support and asking for that energy to be that loving presence to be with me, whatever I have on that day. That's the main thing that I tend to. But again, I'm journaling this all out, so it's not just like a mental prayer. It's written out. Yeah, yeah. And occasionally I'll ask like for guidance to come through from that voice, but I would say mostly it's me writing to it. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, it's the energy of gratitude is really profound. I know that gratitude journaling is like a bit of a, kind of trendy phrase, or like, it's referred to a lot, but actually when I do it, it shifts my inner state so quickly. Um,
Mm.
and yeah, I can see how that's just a way into connecting with the deeper self, with the capital S, let's say, or um,
Mm.
yeah, it's like tuning into a different wavelength or something, because we so often
Mm.
can get caught up in the problems of our day, or the problems of the world. And yeah, gratitude can be, yeah, such
Mm.
a deep way
Mm.
to tap into something different.
Mm. Yeah, really. Yeah. I mean, like I said earlier, I think having a practice like an autumn list is important and getting it out and naming all of the frustrations and the feelings, like everything your inner critic is telling you. I think it's so helpful to name all of this and bring it out. So it's not just hiding somewhere inside. But I do find that ending in a genuine way on gratitude. And it naturally does come forth usually. But if it doesn't, then I do try to, think of a couple of things at least that I know I can be really grateful for. And there's always something, even on my most frustrated days, there's always like something I can hold on to. And for me, find that grounding. Yeah. To finish on that note of gratitude.
Yeah, and the wonderful thing about the journal page is that it can hold it all, right? Like it can
Mm.
hold all
Yeah.
the different expressions of ourselves without judging, without, um, yeah, without casting us into a role or a, a pigeonhole. It's just like
Mm.
there to hold everything, and the honesty that we can bring to it is is what makes it, the more honest we can be with the blank page, then the more it can serve us, I feel.
Mm. Yes. Yeah, I love that. The page can hold it all. It's very true. Uh,
Yeah. Well, thank you
mm.
so much for talking with me today. I've learned a lot from you. Yeah, I've
Yeah, me
really
too.
enjoyed hearing
Mm.
everything that you shared, and I'm sure that my community will love to hear from you too.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation. I have a few things to take into my practice as well. One thing I just realized I haven't mentioned yet is that one great easy thing to do to start connecting with your menstrual cycle as well, if you already have a journaling practice, is to try using a red pen when you're bleeding. This is something I really love to do. So when I'm menstruating and I'm journaling, I use a red pen. And there's something about that I feel like honors the bleed and also makes going back to find patterns really easy and to kind of like demarcate each cycle in the journal because you can see like when those bleeding days were. So as soon as I start bleeding, I have a four-way pen and I switch it to red and then switch back to blue. And it's like a nice way to sort of signify the beginning and the end of each phase and something to play with, see how it lands.
Yeah, I love that. So simple. And
Yeah.
yeah, great. Well, thanks so much, Claire. Yeah. look forward
Pleasure. Thank you so
to,
much for
yeah,
asking me.
speaking with you again sometime.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you.
Thanks.